Hello and welcome to this Orbis live event, The Most Dangerous Trade, Making the Right Choice in Cybersecurity. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Stuart Beattie and I'm Head of Product Marketing here at Orbis Software. I've been involved with cybersecurity for pretty much most of my career and have worked with a variety of cybersecurity companies, including McAfee, Symantec and BAE Systems. I'm actually really excited today to be here to be discussing the intersection between cybersecurity and enterprise architecture. And for this discussion, I'm joined by Aaron. Aaron, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi there, good afternoon, everyone, at least if you're on my time zone. My name's Aaron McManuswood. I'm the Information Security Manager for Orbis, and I kind of oversee and help manage our security program and all things info and cybersec.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Before we get started, I'd just like to remind people that you may not know, but we have actually done several of these Orbis Live events recently on a variety of topics, including things like connecting enterprise architecture and digital transformation, the essentials of a minimal viable enterprise architecture, and exploring enterprise architecture and technology. So these can be found on LinkedIn. If you go to Orbis Software, there's an events tab, so you'll find them there. And I would encourage you to watch these. There's some great discussions from colleagues and external people as well. So I really encourage you to go and look at those. And for today, I'd really like you to participate in the conversation. So there's a chat window. Please feel free to add comments, give us your opinions, and ask us questions. If there's any relevance during our discussions, I'll pick those up and we'll talk about them there and then. If not, we'll certainly leave some time at the end for us to go through and answer as many as we can. So let's dive into the world of cybersecurity and discuss the challenges that cybersecurity professionals face during their everyday work. There's always challenges in the form of trade-offs that need to be made. And these are trade-offs of cost, resource allocation, risk mitigation, and a whole bunch of other things that hopefully we'll get through most of those today. So, Aaron, from what I've heard, sounds like that security professionals are constantly, I suppose, walking a tightrope, always having to make these trade-offs between being as secure as possible and not spending too much time or draining too many vital engineering resources. And I guess it's particularly true these days as most companies, if not all companies, deploy software and deploy technology to some degree to gain competitive advantage, get ahead, do things more efficiently. So with this in mind, how do you go about addressing this balancing act between highly secure and keeping things cost effective? And how would you recommend that other security professionals start in this massive problems?
Oh, thanks for the simple yes/no question there.
That's fair enough.
I think ultimately it comes back to your principles, your methods and models. And I think key is a matter of perspective. What is the lens that you're viewing things from? What kind of resolution are you looking at it, and what angle as well? Because there's lots of ways to look at a problem, to understand it and to resolve it, solve it, avoid it. Now, I remember back in law school, there was a particularly good law lecture where it spoke about is it a duck or a rabbit, and it's a particular picture. I've got a good rendition. It's always good to start with a picture.
Oh yeah.
That I'll share with you now. As you should hopefully all be able to see, there's a wonderful drawing, not mine. Mine, I mean, it's a lot better than mine, to be honest. Of a duck or a rabbit, and how do you look at it? There's a lot better ones out there if you Google the duck-rabbit illusion. And for some people, it's absolutely, until they've been told and pointed out how it's a rabbit, they say, no, it's a duck, and vice versa. They insist it's a rabbit. Other people will, very few people will be able to see nothing at all because it will be an unknown chimera. But what is the answer? What's the truth of it? It's a duck, it's a rabbit, it's a drawing, it's both, it's neither. It's there's lots of different ways that you can approach answering what is this. And it's just a picture on some paper. And so how much more complicated is it actually going to be when you're looking at the perspectives of even a simple enterprise and their infrastructure and their operations? And most organizations don't have a simple structure, especially with home working and all the things that have come in and are much more prevalent now than they were a number of years ago.
No, that makes complete sense. I love the duck rabbit picture as well. So I'm guessing that it's important for us to start off with an end goal in mind. What we're trying to see the wood from the trees, work out what we need to end up with. So how do organizations actually determine a priority list? And I suspect this is one of the first balancing acts, if you like, between severity of attack, likelihood of things happening, those kind of things. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so you need to really understand what you've got. I think was it Donald Rumsfeld said your known knowns, you got your known unknowns, and then the big problem is your unknown unknowns. So you've really got to understand what you've got, what you do and how you do it. They're quite fundamental questions, but they're not easy to really get into the proper detail with. Do you only have one site? Do you have multiple sites across the globe? There's time zones, there's regulations, there's all the compliance, there's the infrastructure itself, your servers. Do you have stuff in the cloud? Do you give everyone a laptop? How do you ensure authentication, and how do you keep things secure? That there's not an infinite amount, but a very long list of what you've got to consider. And then it's cost. You could have the most secure system, but it would be nearly unusable for most modern operations. And that's no good to anyone, because the organization stops functioning.
Yeah.
So that's where you've got to find, and I like to view security and information security in particular as both there's elements of governance, risk, compliance. Definitely, that's a big part of it. There's the kind of applied risk management, that you do, and that's lots of different forms of that. And then there's actually, at its kind of core for a business, is the business enablement. If you need to comply for certain things, for certain security standards, that enables the business to do so. If you're doing it, by being a secure, functional business and giving your customers the assurance of what you do and how you do it, that enables the business. So it's about finding ways that the view of information security and cybersecurity within that is about enabling the business to do things better and not just a cost to avoid a nasty risk. That's also true, but I think it's more productive to view it as an enablement factor and kind of honestly assess it in those terms.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, we're talking about a balancing act there. There were kind of, I quickly scribbled down a few things there. There's the, first of all, the balancing act of making sure you've got everything, making sure you've got everything logged, I suppose, to make sure you know what's happening. But then there's there's cost versus risk. There's business enablement versus security. Then you've got to decide, how much you're going to adhere to the standards. So alone in that answer, you've kind of given me like 6 or 7 different things to actually think about. It's interesting. I think that it's fair to say that it's not really just about the technology, is it? It's kind of we have to look at people and processes as well. Just having a security expert. I know we were discussing before we came on. Having a security expert that understands everything isn't by itself good enough. You need to really understand the infrastructure as well. And I guess that's where enterprise architecture really comes in. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very useful discipline, but you got to look at where you want to be and what that end state is, and then you kind of work backwards to where you are now, and then all the pathways that lead back and forth to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And within that, you need to understand, at its most simple, the people, the places, and the things. And this, the things is a very large category. And enterprise architecture massively helps that. But like anything, like information security, like risk management, governance, anything operational, and everything in the business, really, it's about working properly in a cohesive way that's got proper alignment with what you're all trying to achieve together. And I think at the risk of kind of going on that one, I think I'll stop my.
No, that's fair. And I know we were talking about this the other day as well. It's not, it's all of those things, but just as important, we talked about the kind of processes as well, because it's no good, ringing somebody and you just said the worst case scenario, leaving them a voicemail to tell them there's something wrong, or there's an issue that needs to be fixed, or you've identified something that could be a potential vulnerability, and it's the first, leaving them a voicemail. It's the worst thing.
Plan.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to plan and be ready and test. And you don't want to be in the situation where a voicemail to someone that you're not sure if they're available is the only off the top of your head solution to a problem. It doesn't matter what the problem is, especially if it's a cybersecurity attack or something like that. But it is really any issue, really. That doesn't want to be your solution, because that person's on holiday or they don't pick up. What you're going to do. And you should have that mapped out and planned out, and that's part of your understanding of what you've got and what you need to do in certain circumstances.
Interesting, and also who the owners of the technology are. So if it's a particular server or a particular part of the infrastructure, knowing who's responsible for that, very, very key.
You've got to understand both your perimeter and everything that makes up the interior as well, and the complicated environment that is the cloud. And it makes things a little bit less clear for a lot of people. And I still find myself having to walk people through what cloud is, kind of, and that's okay, because it is a new or newer technology.
And it can be seen as more secure in some instances, but it has to be managed very, very carefully from that point, I guess.
Yeah, it's a big potential enabler. Really useful tool, allows a lot to happen in a lot of new and more efficient and more productive ways, but you've got to do it in the right way. Otherwise it can be a risk as well.
Sure. No, and that's actually twice you mentioned that. I should probably pick on that. Yeah, the idea of security being a business enabler. I know earlier in when I was involved with security, a lot of people see it as a disabler or a blocker to actually doing business, when in reality it can really open up new, done correctly, pushing things to the cloud can be a business enabler from that point of view, allowing people to work now out of the office. That used to be a luxury we had, and it was only given to the privilege was given to a select few. Now it's kind of very much standard due to the events of the last couple of years. So I see. So in the right hands and treated properly, it's interesting you said that business should be security should be a business enabler, rather than seeing it as a blocker.
It should. I mean, but do you think part of the reason why they saw some of the security stuff you'd involved with as a disabler was because it was McAfee?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. Oh, no. But every company, every organization has seen these kind of things. So there we go. So it sounds like so we've kind of, just to kind of recap, we've kind of mapped out the infrastructure. We've got our so we know where our vulnerabilities could be, or we can plan. When we know something happens and there's a future vulnerability appears, we know which potential parts of the network and the infrastructure it could affect. We've got the people lined up, so we know who's responsible for which parts of the infrastructure. We've got the processes, as we've said, so we know how to deal with things, how to deal with updates in the how to deal with updates of the enterprise architecture maps, etc. So we know the relationships between things, and we've put all our security, active and passive security in place. So it sounds as though once those little jobs have done, we're kind of done, right? We'll be in good shape then to protect ourselves against anything going forwards. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, that's one view, but it'd be great if you do the working out, the mapping out, the figuring out and configuring, and then you're done. But that's not the kind of candy floss and rainbows world that we live in, with unicorns dancing by. You need to have a continuous and constant work put in to ensure that your security posture is as good as it can be, and that you are ready for the emerging threats. That the threats from yesterday are not the same threats today necessarily. Some of them are, some of them aren't. And Log4j and Log4Shell that came out, that was a bit of a shock for everyone. If you took the attitude of one and done with getting things ready, then you'd be in a bit of an issue if you had a lot of systems that were affected by that.
Right. No, that makes sense. So it's a case of you've got to keep on top of the external threats, as you say, those examples, what's coming in, and also, I guess, keeping track of the internal infrastructure, which is constantly, even in relatively small, relatively simple organizations, the new applications coming in, new building, new places, all those kind of things.
Exactly. You've got to keep on top of what you've got and what you're doing, and what the potential adversary and the potential threat actors are doing as well.
Yeah.
And that comes from understanding, the threat landscape, and how that maps across to and how that you could be affected, and it changes all the time. And and there's the random factors too. People just make mistakes. Sometimes there are just errors which leave you vulnerable. They could be computing errors, coding errors, could be physical errors. They could be disasters in terms of hurricanes and what have you. That because your security team is in Florida and they've been hit by a storm, they're no longer available when you need them, and you haven't got the contingency. So you've got to really keep on top of things about what's happening, and have the contingencies, and either have them so they automatically come into play, or that some element of the business is always ready to bring them into play.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I know I've been speaking a lot to customers and colleagues internally about this idea of this not new idea, but a new regulations coming in the UK about operational resilience, specifically for the finance sector. But I think that's exactly what you're talking about. It's what we've done. It's what's happened in security for a long time, making sure that we are as resilient as possible to prevent things from happening. But then the flip side is, if we are caught out, then actually having the procedures, processes, and everything in place to deal with that. And you say it's not just security and cybersecurity issues. It is natural disasters, and and we're dealing with people at the end of the day, and they're going to ultimately, there's going to be mistakes made across the board somewhere. So we've got to actually capture these things, right? So
yeah, exactly.
So finally, I know we kind of mentioned enterprise architects and their tools quite a bit, and I know that a lot of our viewers are existing Orbis customers, and therefore enterprise architects using iServer 365. It sounds as though there's a lot of value, a lot of valuable information within an enterprise architect's repository about the infrastructure, about the connections between, relationships between different artifacts in there, which could be valuable to companies when they're trying to make these trade-offs between, of cost, levels of cost, levels of security, levels of risk they're willing to accept, etc. So, do you have any specific advice for enterprise architects, and specifically, how they would work with you as a security, as a head of security, and indeed other cybersecurity teams?
Well, I'd hesitate to advise another profession on their job, but just I think generally speaking, and it will definitely apply to enterprise architects or anyone who has a direct relationship to planning and applying security. It's about good communication. It's about understanding. It's about having that common dialogue about what things mean. So you understand each other's perspectives. Take some time, and if you can, understand the security architects. They have a similar but different discipline, not often as well understood, I think. And if you can, bring one into your organization. It doesn't have to be permanent. It could just be a consultancy thing. But they'll bring value. When it comes to working with the wider InfoSec and CyberSec team, talk to them, let them share things, let them see what you've got, so they can better align what they understand is the threat landscape with what you understand is the operational landscape for the business enterprise architecture. Talk to legal, talk to your insurers. Make sure you've got if you've got third-party legal entities that you engage them in part of your planning. So you've got all the elements there to work with each other for your contingencies, for your tests, for your disaster recovery, instant response. You've got these elements that understand each other better and can work together better. And if something does happen, because you've got that understanding and that relationship, you can act on it.
That's great. That's good. So it sounds like there's lots of departments, lots of different areas and departments involved with cybersecurity. As you say, legal, compliance, internal and external, and it sounds like it's a big kind of communications effort between.
And I think a properly managed information security program or cybersecurity program. The terms are used a bit interchangeably depending on people's view on definitions. Then that awareness program, that kind of building of the relationships is a key part of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great, thank you. So that's some good advice for the enterprise architects that are listening, working with the security architects. Bring them in, get them involved, and you can certainly add some good value, from the information you've actually got and built up in your enterprise architecture tools. So that's great. So just a reminder, we're going to come on some questions now. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the sidebar there. We've already had a couple coming in, so we'll address those. But please feel free to add more, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to answer those. So first one, Aaron. So someone really liked your duck rabbit picture. Looking at the different points of view, which is great. How can companies ensure on that note? How can companies ensure that the different points of view between different security departments, between that and the EA, just generally across the board? How can we make sure that the different points of view don't cause problems in how cybersecurity is viewed, I guess, and also implemented? And how can that be resolved, I guess, more importantly?
Communication, teamwork, alignment of your strategy, governance, and operational management.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier said than done. It's very quick to say. That's a very complicated thing to achieve.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a large organization.
Yeah.
And have that common framework to refer to. If you can, have even a simple document that defines what information security is, what cybersecurity is in the context of your business, and how you do it, even if it's very high level.
Yeah.
So you understand what each other does and who can do what, not just who should do what, and just work together. And then I think awareness programs and that, and socializing, if you can, depending on time zones, is absolutely key, really, to helping that.
So understanding each other back down to, as you say, the communication. Interesting, right? So, so kind of back to the security working with enterprise architects. So, in your different security roles, have you worked with, and how have you worked with enterprise architects? And if not, what would you recommend? And did you find the information that the enterprise architects had and were storing? Did you find it useful, and how, I guess, as well?
Yes, I have had the pleasure of working with a few enterprise architects or former enterprise architects who had transitioned to some more project management type fields, and they had a good understanding of what the landscape would be, could be, and should be, and they were good at helping map things out, and I think mapping something out so you can communicate something as clearly as possible is really critical in helping people understand. Words are great, talking's great, but a picture, a diagram with the accompaniment of the words and the talking is a lot better. It's a good thing to refer to be a good refresher.
No, that's great. And final question here. Related very much to that one, I think you kind of may have answered it, but just in case there's anything else specific. So, how do you document the processes to ensure that everyone's on the same page?
Well, you should have your policies and procedures widely shared to throughout the company. You should talk about and meet and plan how you're going to work together with shared processes and how that's going to be recorded and followed up on. And when it comes to things like business continuity, disaster recovery, incident response, you should test those regularly. And in doing that, and especially if you can take the time to go through as full a test as possible, you'll see how they work, how things get documented, and how the follow-up would work. Even if you don't have the time to, after you've done your half a day or a day, you don't have time to do the follow-up, which would naturally be weeks if in the case of a real event that was as serious as you might have just tested. You can understand what you or others would have to do and identify the areas of improvement. Might be that you need a SharePoint site. Might be that you need a paper folder. If that is if you're working on a ship, it all depends on the context of your environment to what is going to be best, so you can consistently get things done in a way that is actually going to work and be efficient.
Yeah. Or ideally an enterprise architecture tool as well, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Tied in with SharePoint as well, but there we go. Yeah. So
Yeah.
no, that's great. So that looks like, time wise, we've up on time now. So thank you, Aaron, for spending the time with us today, sharing your thoughts about addressing these tough choices and giving us some hints and tips on how what's made you successful on a daily basis, and hopefully giving some tips to other cybersecurity professionals and non-cybersecurity professionals who have to work with work with enterprise architects and security professionals. And thank you also to everyone that's been listening live or on the recording. And sorry if we didn't get to your question. Please contact me or Aaron via LinkedIn or via our website, orbus.com, and we'd be happy to follow up and answer any questions you might have, either about specific to the topic today on cybersecurity and doing that balancing act, or on the wider enterprise architecture and how we can actually link that to the work that cybersecurity professionals do. So once again, I'd like to thank you for listening. Remember to go and look at the previous Orbus Live events, and watch out for more events, Orbus Live events coming up very, very soon. Thank you and goodbye.
Cheers, thanks.